What's up, everybody? We are back with another Forging Alpha Gymcast, number 2, and we're pretty excited for it.
The Pumpcast.
The old Pumpcast. What are we training today?
We're training arms.
Ooh.
Literally the Pumpcast.
The literal Pumpcast.
Maybe our first product release is going to be a pump cover.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Pump covers they weren't a thing when I was in like high school and I was getting started lifting weights. It was always like, you just kind of wore your stringer, I think. So it's kind of a newer thing.
It is. Well, did you grow up though always wearing, like especially like powerlifting or stuff, hoodies and stuff to warm up in?
Of course.
Yeah. I was always more of a, I would always wear sometimes multiple layers.
Really?
Yeah.
What type of layers were you doing?
Like sometimes I would have stringer, but then I would have like a long sleeve baseball, like 3/4 shirt over the top of that, and then a hoodie.
Yep. So it was like layer all the way through the workout.
Yeah. And then I usually always was wearing sweats to warm up on leg day, and I always take them off at a certain point.
Were you a short shorts kind of guy?
Nope. I
Never?
wasn't. My shorts have progressively gotten shorter over the past few years. What about you?
Well, I used to be a real short kind of guy.
Really?
Not in high school, but yeah, like in college and stuff. I had some pretty short shorts. So it was kind of a little bit at the beginning of that trend happening in the bodybuilding space.
Yep.
Not for the first time, obviously, like in the 80s and shit. That's all they wore, but.
You know, it's kind of coming back, and I kind of like it.
I'm a fan. It's like.
I was always a long short wearer because I was college baseball. So it was always like right below the knees or right at the knees.
I've been a pretty, as far as like body parts, I would say chest is probably my best.
Yeah.
But then, especially back in the days, some pretty good quads. So I like to show that off a little bit.
Yeah. What are we talking about today, Rick?
We're giving advice to our younger self, that kind of 18 to 21-year-old self. If you're in that range, we're kind of looking back and giving ourselves some wisdom.
Yeah.
In our old age now.
Fitness-wise, what would be your advice going back to your younger self?
Eat more protein. Man, in high school, I thought I was doing it right because I was eating the salad bar and I was like, I definitely leaned out a little bit, but I missed a big opportunity for growth by not eating enough.
Yep.
So I wish I would have prioritized protein in that, especially like sophomore through senior area.
Yeah.
And like I took bodybuilding and like fitness and training pretty seriously for the most part, especially like compared to my peers and somebody in high school, but I didn't take the sports side of it quite as serious, to be honest.
Okay.
Like when I was in practice, obviously I was focused and engaged, but whenever I was doing any training outside of sports, it was all directly towards just either being a better athlete or trying to put on muscle and gain strength, which is great from like an athletic development side. But I think I missed out a little bit on like actually taking football seriously and that type of thing.
Yeah.
Not that I really think I wanted to go down that road of college sports, but I don't feel like I quite emptied the bucket, so to speak. I kind of started to take it for granted a little bit those last couple years.
Yeah.
What about you? When did you start taking it serious?
And we're talking fitness, right?
Yes.
So I didn't start taking it serious in the sense of any structure until after my freshman year of college, probably. Going back, advice-wise, first and foremost would have been, the nutrition end, because that's obviously what I do, and why I do that is because I was a skinny bastard. And had I been focused more on that during early high school years, I think it would have been a complete game changer. Like had I put on, 50 pounds over the course of like high school versus when I got to college,
Oh, yeah.
I would have been a better athlete. Probably would have gone different places.
Like if you would have hit those beginner gains, so to speak, a little bit earlier.
And if I would have had structure with like the lifting earlier on, that would have been a game changer. So going back, it would have been, I wish I would have played less summer ball stuff. And you don't know what you don't know. And focused more on that development earlier on, because you can always keep playing games. Like there's a certain window though with your opportunity for physical development, and even whether it's like passing the eye test in terms of colleges and scouts and all that, but also just that window of when you have the most potential for, you know, building muscle and having progress, like during puberty and those earlier years, like you've got such a opportunity to take advantage of that I didn't utilize that as much as possible. So one, it would be just eat. It doesn't have to be complicated, but I would tell myself just go back and start eating every 3 hours, go to bed earlier, and get in the weight room and like have some structure. Because even when I hit that stride, like I started training when my freshman year of college intensely, but I was like a squirrel just running around the gym, doing random different things. There wasn't much structure to that. We finally got structure, even though it wasn't the best programming per se. Intensity and relative structure were there, and I made a lot of progress because of that.
Yeah.
So it would be eat more, get structure, lift really intensely earlier on.
Train with intention.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about that applies to whatever age you're at.
Yeah.
But especially what you were just saying, like the first time I started really making gains was my freshman year of college. I did the freshman 20 or 25, but it was a pretty good 20 or 25.
Okay.
And a lot of that was a combination of unlimited meals at the cafeteria, which is obviously fantastic. And then we did Arnold's Blueprint to Mass, which was a bodybuilding.com workout.
Yep,
it was
I
like a
remember that.
12-week program. I remember it started off like a set of 30, 12, 10, 8, 6. So it was like a little bit higher volume, and then it would transition to some 10 by 10 stuff.
Yep.
But I made a ton of progress on that program just by following a program and having that progressive overload and having enough food.
Well, nutrition-wise, what would you tell yourself, like specifically going back? You mentioned protein. Is there anything else?
I think for a long time.
Last hit on these? Hit some
Yeah.
hammer curls after?
Yep. I think for a long time I focused just too much on trying to look good now for whatever reason. I mean, I was in high school, so it didn't make that big of a deal, you know? Like I was already in better shape than a lot of people, instead of prioritizing my future development. So what I mean by that is like, I probably missed out on a lot of growth opportunity because I just stayed in either a maintenance phase or even a deficit for too long.
Yep.
Trying to look lean just for the sake of looking lean in the gym and not really having a longer term vision to what I wanted my training to be. Because if you're just dieting all the time, and this is what I see a lot in the competition world, the bodybuilding world.
Yep.
People do like 3-4 shows a year, and they look the fucking same. The last show as they did the first show, and like unless you have them just back to back, and you want to really make it worth it on your prep, I don't see a lot of benefit to doing that many shows in a year.
And competing, and that's coming back to like having phases where you're in a surplus and actually eating.
Yes.
And on the flip side of that too, that's a huge issue in the athletic space. Like, you know, there's definitely ties in there. Like you get, going back to what I said with, you know, competing, playing summer ball, multiple sports, the guys now that are spending half of the year eating and training and being in the weight room tend to be the better athletes in the long term because they've got phases just left for development. And they're not just competing, which competing, you keep doing that, like competing is competing. You're focusing on performance at that point. It's not focused on like development, putting on muscle, those things that are probably gonna get you to the next level. You're not gonna be moving towards that goal as quickly if you're just competing all the time.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And it's not just technique that's going to take you to the next level. Like if you're an 80% in technique, but you're a 40% in your athletic development as far as like your strength, your speed, your endurance.
Yep.
You're going to get a lot more out of it by focusing on that rather than trying to squeak out another 5% on the technique side.
Yeah. And the thing is, like on technique, is everybody thinks, and this can be, translated with even bodybuilding, people want to focus like so much on their posing. Athletes want to focus so much on technique of certain things running, when those people that are focusing just on like posing stuff, you'd probably be winning more shows if you had 30 more pounds of stage muscle, right? Or an athlete, you would be 100 times faster if you actually strong enough to apply force. You were eating in a way that you had the muscle mass to actually be powerful versus just focusing on technique stuff. Like if you're a 80-pound individual, no amount of focusing on technique is going to overcome the limiting factor.
Yes.
That you are 50 pounds underweight.
Dude, so that was me to a T in like middle school wrestling.
Got it.
Not as much in high school.
Yeah.
But like in 8th grade, I was wrestling 148. So I was about probably 140 pounds. I was wrestling up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Could you hop back in there real quick?
Yeah.
I'm gonna set our camera angle for these curls.
Yeah.
If there's a time to look good, it's on the curls, man.
During the curls. Curls for the girls.
Curls for the girls. Curls for the guys.
I don't think there's any girls watching this. No ladies watching the Forge and Alpha podcast outside of my mom.
Do we have a Bosu ball in here? Should we get one of those?
We can do some curls on them. Curls on the Bosu ball. Yeah, I mean, it's a big thing, especially as guys climb the higher ranks of baseball, because not a lot of top-level D1 programs, not a lot of pro organizations are going to go after the guys that are 50 pounds underweight. I've actually had guys that decided to keep doing it on their own who lost their scholarships to major schools because the stipulation for their scholarship was they needed to gain X amount of weight coming into the fall at school. And they didn't do that, so they ended up getting decommitted from scholarship opportunities.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what I was, before I got distracted trying to figure that camera out, on the, back to the old middle school days with wrestling, I was wrestling kids that were bigger than me, but I was a pretty lean jack kid even in 8th grade.
Yep.
And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. My like main move was just an ankle pick. Dude, I would fuck kids up though. Just because I was more developed from a strength aspect, they could have been wrestling their whole life. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a competition with somebody that's significantly stronger than you are, to some degree, the technique's not going to make it up.
No. And I was kind of in the same boat. Like I was very wiry stronger. Like I got to a certain point, like I was taking it seriously. I just didn't know what I was doing. Like I was doing push-ups and sit-ups every single night my junior through senior year of high school, right? But there's only going to be a certain extent that you're going to get doing that in a sport that...
Who's that? What? Who had the legend behind him? Was it Herschel Walker or something?
Yeah.
1,000 push-ups, 1,000 sit-ups a day?
Yeah. Thing is, though, guys, you like to use exceptions to the rule as the marker for what they should be doing. You know?
Well, and I think that really leads into another good piece of advice, especially when you're in your 20s. When you go into the gym, don't necessarily just copy what the biggest guys in there are doing.
So, yeah, I mean, because genetically, especially when it comes to a lot of dietarians and training things, you're not going to get the results typically coming from the advice of those genetically superior people. What worked for them, the guys that could look at a weight, or they're just doing calisthenics, and they were Herschel Walkers, the advice coming from those people is not always the greatest.
It's not.
It's really not.
Which is unfortunate, because you would think that the biggest part of your credibility and what you know is the results that you have yourself, but that's not the case because there's just so many other factors that go into it.
100%. And obviously, like, it'll get you to certain places, but I think that's also where some of the dangers in like bodybuilding come from. Like, there's a lot of bro science goes on and people can die from it. Especially when we start getting into the conversations of like performance enhancing drugs and diuretics and people that just, you know, they genetically look good. They're just blindly going about protocols and they have zero knowledge about what certain drugs, dehydration, what actually goes on with that process. Like, there was a girl at the Arnold that died due to dehydration complications. And that is 100% just a negligence thing where she was probably working with a coach that worked with a lot of genetically superior guys or gals that could do whatever they want, you know, and they are going to look good irregardless. And they do stupid things with techniques or drugs. But then eventually that is going to have a negative outcome.
100%. Yeah, diuretics, I did a couple shows and diuretics are something I had stayed pretty clear of. Just because even not knowing a ton behind the science at the time just seems like a pretty stupid thing to do when you're getting contest leanness. Hey, let's go ahead and excrete as much water as possible. That's not gonna end up very well. And a lot of them are cutting out water at the same time. Trying to squeeze that last 2% out of their competition or out of their physique. But most of these athletes, they're not even competing at a national level.
Yeah.
Like, they're not even coming in lean.
Yeah.
Like, before you try to dehydrate yourself and work with some jackass coach that thinks they know what they're doing, get lean first. You're not gonna have a peak week that takes off 3% body fat. Like, if you're not lean, you're not lean.
Yep. Advice you would give your younger self on relationships.
Ooh. Well, thankfully, I'm still in the same relationship that I was when I was 16, so it worked out.
That is probably underrated.
But what could have worked out better, and something that we've still talked about recently, is just like making sure that you prioritize a weekly date night. Like, that's something that you could start. It felt like something that I couldn't do in college and just out of college because I didn't have any money.
Okay.
But it doesn't take money to have a date night. So I think that's something that would have been really easy to implement even when Lauren was in nursing school, was just like a weekly date night. Whether that's go drive out to Triaki, the Chinese place there in Hayes, and just get something cheap to eat. Like, just taking that time to spend time, just the two of us, as opposed to with all of our friends.
That's big. What about non-romantic relationships? Friends, family, like what on a thing that you would do more of, things you wish you would have done differently, or even things you wish you would have done less of from a boundary standpoint?
I think I would just tell myself that there's seasons to your life, kind of in all aspects, but that applies to friendships as well.
Yeah.
And like, there's people that you'll be really close with for a while, and then you'll not talk to them for a couple years. But just understanding now, like, you can go 5 years without talking to someone and then pick up like it was yesterday. And I don't think I realized what that time would feel like.
Yeah.
Like, when you're in high school, if you picture like not talking to somebody for 5 years, it's like, oh, that was like forever ago. Like, so much has happened in 5 years. But you can totally maintain relationships and friendships without talking to the people all the time.
Yep. would personally say care less about what people think about you with the people that aren't going to matter in 5 or 10 years.
Because very few people will matter in 5 to 10 years.
Because it makes a difference. When people say, like, don't give a shit what anybody thinks. You need to care what certain people think about. Certain people that matter, certain people that count, I think it's kind of it's the wrong attitude to have, thinking that screw everybody, what anybody thinks, because obviously if like you're employed, you probably should care what your boss thinks if you plan on being there for an extended amount of time.
Absolutely.
You should probably care what your wife thinks. But most people in our lives that we typically want to impress or we care what they think about, you're probably not going to want them in your life. Let's move over and do some stuff with the easy bar.
Yep.
They're probably not going to be in your life, and you're not going to want them to be in your life in the future. And that's just the way it is.
Absolutely.
I would say start taking serious things more serious. Like from a relation standpoint of view, don't get into stupid relationships. Don't stay in stupid relationships if you know it's not going to work out.
Like if you can't see yourself being with them long term, then there's no point in.
Yeah. If you've got doubts, don't try to shut that voice down. Because now on the flip side, now that I am married, I am with somebody that's like, man, it's pretty easy. It's not
timber.
It's not a knockdown drag out in terms of I'm constantly annoyed. I'm constantly having to deal with battles. I think a lot of people normalize that, or they make excuses for that, especially when you're dating. And not really the way it should be. Not really the way it should be. And once you find that, you're like, wow, like this is what it's supposed to be like. Like obviously you're gonna have issues, but you should have meaningful issues, not just dumb shit.
Absolutely. Like, I think part of that is because fighting and those relationship battles are so normalized in our society. Like people for some reason expect that.
Yep.
Or act like it's totally a normal deal. And that's just not the case. I mean, obviously there's still times that Lauren and I have some disagreements, but it's few and far between. How are those feeling?
Juicy, baby.
All right.
I would say from a friendship standpoint, invest more heavily into those.
In what way? Oh, were those squeaking for you?
I can't remember now. Add more than you take away from it. You should be looking to add more to people's lives, in whichever way, than you're looking to get out of them. I think I was not as good of a friend in the past with some people because I wasn't thinking about that. Like, what ways can I invest into making our relationship stronger, thinking more about the other person than myself in this situation? So I can be a pretty selfish bastard with things. And I think that, honestly, getting into business, working with clients helped me out with that as well, because you're having to build the relationships from the ground up, and typically you have to give more than you're going to take in those situations to make them successful.
What that also does, and the thing that kind of pairs hand in hand with that, is thinking long term and realizing that somebody that you meet today could play an important role in your life 5 years down the road.
Yes.
And it's like, there's no way, not that relationships is just like about getting something out of it in the end, but as far as like a strategic business aspect of life and strategy, like a lot of those relationships, are in your life for a reason down the road. And if you don't take care of those people and play the long game and in your outlook, those opportunities are never going to arise.
And I think that's where being better at distinguishing those things, the people that are worth putting that time and effort into, and the people that aren't, letting that go away, that's something I would give advice to my younger self. Because when you're in a relationship where like there's animosity or they're probably not the best people to be surrounding yourselves with, subconsciously you tend to start adding less to that relationship. You know, and you're better off just like, because you're in such a lukewarm relationship, and that's not really what I'm looking for in this point of life, whether that's business-wise, friendship-wise, out of my marriage or my relationship. So, like, if there is a very surface-level relationship, it's probably better just ending that. Because you're probably not going to add a lot to that relationship, and you're not going to get a lot out of it. Because that's the thing, too, is like, typically the more you add to it, like in a selfish way, you will get everything that you need by giving more into a certain relationship. So
100%. And you can't go all in on hundreds of different relationships. And to a large degree, quality is better than quantity in relationships. It's not just about knowing a ton of people. It's about knowing people well, knowing how you can add value, knowing what their strengths are, and being able to connect different people that trust you, and you have a history of that value being there in the relationship, as opposed to, hey, I met this guy this one time. I don't know anything about him, but I mean, I kind of know his name.
Yep.
Because you are right, though. Like, a lot of people that are in your life are not going to be in your life in the next season. And that's okay. I think oftentimes, though, we might have an idea of who those people are going to be. And we might know that a relationship or friendship isn't good for us, but we continue to put time into it.
Yep.
And it's a little bit of a sunk cost fallacy at that point.
And you're going to have that when you're younger. And it's okay to maybe screw up, go through it, learn that a few times. But if you're doing that into your 30s and 40s and 50s, which a ton of people do, like at that point, you kind of deserve the situations, and friendships and relationships that you are in at that point.
Absolutely.
Skull crushers?
Yeah. Flat or a little bit of an incline? What do you prefer?
Ooh, I don't know. What you sound?
Let's do a small incline.
Let's do that.
A shot. Would you pick that guy up? I'm gonna slide this bench over there, just so we stay clear of this one random pole I've got.
The one random pole. We love random poles. I keep getting updates from people at my back door on the Ring doorbell.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, right?
What about it from a career aspect? Is there anything that you would go back and tell thy 20-year-old self?
Burn the ships sooner. Take the jump, take the risk, and buy more Bitcoin.
And buy more Bitcoin.
Buy more Bitcoin.
That's kind of the golden answer. We could. That realistically should be the end of the podcast, actually.
Dude, if I would have gone back to even graduating college when kind of everybody knew what that was, be a little bit of a different story. But here we are. Other things, career-wise. Advice, it's going to be really shitty and it's going to be really hard. And just when you think it's really shitty and really hard, it's about to get shittier and harder. Yeah.
I would say that don't let the lack of knowing what the entire staircase looks like scare you from taking the step. Steve Harvey said it. You don't have to know. What did he say? You don't have to know what the whole staircase looks like. just the next step. Don't have to see the whole staircase. I don't know what the full quote was, and I'm going to contribute that to all the blood being in my arms at this point. But
not your brain.
The point is, you just got to take action. And I meet with a lot of business owners every week.
Yep.
And I was a pretty smart kid, coming through school and then after school, everything like that. At least I would consider myself to be pretty smart, at least book smart and that type of thing. I always thought about things a little differently. But I think one thing that held me back was because I would think things through so much and I was so in my head, sometimes that kept me from just taking a step because I was considering so many different outcomes where, especially in the blue collar space, dude, I see it time after time. These guys they work hard, they're not scared of risk, and they just fucking take action. If it's the wrong action, they adjust and they move on. But they don't sit there wondering what if, or imagining all the ways that it could go wrong, or thinking through all the different strategies. They just take the action and take the step. And I think that's huge.
I think so too. Yeah. Yep. I really don't want to deal with people at this point in life that take too much time on the right thing to do, whether that's clientele, whether that's people I'm going to do business with. If you're not willing to take a jump and take massive action just because it's scary, that's mainly what, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. But when it's just because you're scared, like I don't want to be around it, because I think I had a lot of that because I was a product of my environment being around so much of that.
Yeah.
So now if it's around me, it almost gives me anxiety.
You can you're worried about it rubbing off on you in a way.
I'm worried about getting back into that mindset.
Yeah.
I mean, we're essentially talking a lot about scarcity.
100%, man.
Extent. And whether that's intentional scarcity or subconsciously you're just that person that overthinks it, I would consider myself one of those people. But it's a muscle like anything else. It's a muscle like anything else. The other thing I would say, going back to myself, is set the bar higher. Give yourself grace along the way, but also don't let yourself off the hook.
Still hold yourself accountable.
Yeah.
And be your own best advocate.
Yeah.
Be your own coach.
You've got to have those stop points when you start getting too into the rut, where you're beating yourself up, and then it's not productive, because then that's just the distraction. That's the bottleneck. But at the same time, way too many people are accepting of mediocrity. And excellence is a standard you have to have in all aspects of life if you want to translate over to business and work. So if there are missing links in your personal life, it's going to trickle over in some capacity to professional life. So start getting on top of those now.
Oh, 100%. Man, honestly, I can't believe there's people out there that think they're good at business that don't even take care of their bodies. People that think, oh, it's vain to be trying to get a six-pack. What I care about is business and taking care of my family. And that's a pretty limited way to think about it, because if there's one thing I do know over the last 10, 15 years, whatever it's been that I've been training pretty seriously, is it's ebbed and flowed to a degree. But the better shape that I'm in, the more confident I'm in, the higher energy level I operate with, I'm a different person.
Yep.
And if you don't think that's the case, then you just haven't been in good shape before. And that's fine. But when you feel good about yourself, the way you look, the way you feel, you're full of energy, everything in your life is better.
Yep.
And obviously there is a point, though, that if the only thing you care about in your life is looking better, and perhaps the bodybuilding prep is the only thing that has any attention in your life, obviously that can be a detriment.
100%.
But if you're doing it right, it should be adding energy to your life.
Should be an anchor. I'd say don't listen to people that aren't where you're at in all aspects. Faith, family, finance, fitness. Don't listen to people that tell you can't have it all, that you've got to be the fat guy in a BMW. Or if you want to have a good marriage, you've got to be working for minimum wage, and you can't be productive in work. Because there are people out there that are doing it all, and you have to go find those people, and then those are the people that you listen to. If you wouldn't trade places with somebody else in some aspect of life, whatever it is that they're giving advice on, don't listen to them. If you got a divorced person that's been divorced 5 times giving you advice about why you shouldn't get married and you don't want that for you, don't listen to that person. If you're listening to somebody that's broke give you advice on money and business, probably shouldn't be listening to them if you wouldn't trade places with them as well. All right, dumbbell.
Yeah.
Dumbbell incline and some dips.
Yep.
After that. Yeah. What else we got? What advice would you give to your former self in terms of hobbies, enjoyment, and fun? I got pissed like a racehorse.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, you want to do that while I set up this camera?
As in you want to take a break?
Not bad. Totally up to you, man.
We can keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hold it in, brother.
Hold it in.
Relax. He's
set
going.
up, dude.
He's going.
I'm going. I'm going to put it on microphone too.
All right, so we're going to hear if Caleb is actually taking a leak or if he's about to take a giant shit. So let us know down below what you think he's doing in there. And I guess you can probably just about hear it by now. Oh, those are nice. Those are nice.
What's up, buddy? You hear it?
You know, I couldn't, but the camera probably did.
Probably did.
Welcome back.
I left
dude.
the door cracked open, and the dog came in, so I was battling the dog off in the middle of this.
Oh.
You all right?
Yep, just the quad.
Torn?
Nope. Just took a shot to the quad. It'll be all right. It'll buff. Yeah, dude. I tell myself 10 years isn't that long.
You say what?
10 years isn't that long of a time.
Nope.
Like when we think about, gosh, what if I'm not, for some, like you have this, maybe it's not an illusion or anything, but it's like, at least I did. I had some rush that I need to be successful by X time. And I think everybody has a different time. It could be a 20, 25, 30, 50, whatever. But just realizing that as long as you still have the mindset to grow and learn, the game's not over.
No.
Like you're still learning and developing every day.
I mean, how many people, make it by 50?
There's so many people that start their business after 45.
Ah, alternating guy, huh?
Big alternating guy. Are you more of a at the same time guy?
I think it depends.
On what?
Machines versus that. Preacher curl. I think I prefer single arm. Yeah, Rick. Yeah, Rick. General life advice.
Dream bigger. Yeah, something I'm realizing a lot right now is like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I liked business and wanted to help things grow, and it was exciting to me, but I could never figure out kind of like what industry, and things have just kind of worked out to this point where when I look back now, it's kind of exactly where I always used to imagine myself being at the time.
Yep.
But you got to keep reinventing what you want that future to look like as you approach it. Because I think a lot of people might have a big dream, or maybe they did once upon a time. And they might actually be at that dream now, and they're starting to feel frustrated. They're like, oh, we made it. I thought I'm supposed to be happy now. What happened? And that's kind of a combination of a couple things. One being thinking that some material thing is going to be the answer to your questions. But then also, too, like the progress is perhaps the most enjoyable part. So you got to keep having new goals and having reasons to grow. Yeah, because I think that's why a lot of people stop growing, is they really don't have any goals that push them to grow.
Yep.
I would say document more of the process along the way. I think a lot of young people, especially, myself included at times, you have a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? When you're,
describe it to me.
That's right there on the tip of my tongue. When you think that you're not like the right fit for the role you're in.
Imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome. Gosh. I had to fight for that one so hard I almost forgot where I was going with it.
All right.
It'll come back to me.
Dips after this?
Yeah. You do a lot of incline curls?
Not a lot. I've started adding them into here.
Hey, I just recently started adding them in again as well.
I like them though. They're one of my favorites.
I'm a big fan.
General life advice. I'd say even when you're busy, it's a focus for you, focusing on sport, career, whatever it is. Take time out for experiences.
Those are the things that you're really going to remember.
At the end of the day, like anything, like all the time, my initial reaction to things is I just need to be holed up in my office and never leaving it. You know?
Yeah.
Even if like weekends, like this time of my life is for grinding. But then like looking back, I'm probably gonna have more regrets about not going on camping trips with people I love, not hanging out with certain people, than I will looking back, thinking about those extra 15 days a year that I worked. So obviously you've got to still continue doing that. But I think forcing yourself into a position where you have to make it all work versus just letting that limiting belief come in of this is the way it is, this is the way it has to be because this is what everybody else does. Not accepting that. It doesn't have to be that way. I mean, you start reading books like The 4-Hour Workweek or looking at Tim Ferriss's life and like look at what people have accomplished out of the ordinary. And that really just full circle comes back to not caring what most people think about you, caring what the right people think about you. And if you have a certain goal for your life, a way of living, figure that out. Don't let it just be a dream that dies.
All right, don't hit your head on this. Are we close?
Yes, very close.
Head down.
Head down. Let's go. At your elbow, or at your shoulder clicking?
Elbow.
Nice. Ever had any bad injuries?
Concussion, a little bit of a finger problem, nothing serious, man.
Nothing serious?
No crazy comeback stories, thankfully. Some lower back stuff, but nothing that's like been a hospitalized big ordeal. I know you've been dealing with some hip problems as of late, but
Well, the past couple of years. Yeah, I've had some injury history. I mean, there's people that have a lot more. I had this finger snapped. Actually, my buddy AJ broke it. Had to put a rod up through surgery.
what would you say to, there's going to be a lot of young athletes that are listening to this. What would you say to them about how to deal with injuries in the future if they do arise, or what the outlook should be on that? Obviously, it's a case-by-case thing, but is there anything that they could kind of start doing now? Or is there anything that, because one thing that I think I probably could have done a better job as a younger guy, is that a lot of times when guys were saying like preaching mobility and stuff, it was coming from a 50, 60-year-old guy, somebody we felt like so much further down the road that you almost had that like, I'm invincible, it doesn't really matter to me type thing. But like even now, being at 28, like I still could have benefited from like prioritizing mobility more in the last 10 years. Like obviously I still can now, but would that help those younger athletes?
Yes.
Or what are some things they can do?
Yeah, I think that, so first and foremost, injuries happen when a force is placed on your body or a range of motion that you do not have the capacity for. So that's why strength training is probably the most important, and getting a lot of your mobility from ranges of motion and building up resiliency within your muscles, your tissues, your tendons, ligaments. Like that's the main priority. You can do all the mobility stuff you want, and typically when we start talking about mobility, like mobility is active. That's the difference between flexibility and mobility. Flexibility, think about like yoga, pulling your arm across, reaching down and touching your toes. There's no active component there, where you're taking a joint into an active range of motion by yourself. And so typically when we start looking at that, like real mobility, like there's things called CARs, where you're taking controlled articular rotations, where you're taking those things full range of motion, and you can start loading that to get stronger. It usually ends up coming back to some type of loading. Like you need to get like stronger with loading and actually taking those muscles into range of motion. So yes, but it's also not just yoga.
Yeah.
That we're talking about. The other thing too is like every problem that we have as an athlete is a nutrition problem in some capacity, like injury-wise, under eating, macros, micros. If that lack of diet is affecting your sleep, so you're not recovering, and it starts there. The most injured I ever was when the shittiest my diet ever was. So like preemptively, it plays a big role. Hydration status, if you're not hydrated, you're increasing injury risk for like 30%.
That's a significant amount.
It is a significant amount. So that...
Especially if you're in a position where you're doing a practice a day, or maybe you're even doing 2 days, or you're doing a sports practice and you're working out, like you're so active that you need to really be pushing hydration. The opportunity for that risk, you're running around doing crazy stuff all the time.
So, and then on the flip side of that, once you are injured, time is a component, getting back mobility and movement is a component, but like physical therapy, movement, what is that doing? You're supplying those tissues with nutrient-rich blood that's coming in there. You don't have enough of the building blocks to give the builders room to work with, which are nutrients coming in. You're gonna be going a lot slower with that process. That's also where, like supplementation, if you're not an athlete, some of the peptide therapy stuff, PRP. So like it's gonna play a major part even in your recovery. Like if you don't have the proteins in high enough amounts to help with recovery, because you already require protein to keep your skin, nails, organs alive.
Your regular daily activity and stuff.
If you're asking extra demand of your body, like rehealing a muscle tendon and ligament. It's like you're building a house. Your house or the builders, you've got to have a certain amount of bricks already. You have an added demand for those bricks if you want an addition built onto your house, or if there's a giant wall that has a hole in it, you've got to replace that. If you don't have enough bricks, you're going to go really slow, or it's not going to happen as well. So focusing on that, absolutely a mobility thing. I also think it's a heavy nutrition, hydration component as well. Whew.
Brick by brick?
What?
Brick by brick?
Brick by brick.
I like it. I think I'm out of gas, man.
I think it's a wrap.
Good shit.
Good shit. This was the Pumpcast. We'll catch you guys later.
Peace.